Well, thank you everyone for staying with us here on the desk. This is Global Television. We're live in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. And we are Mofwegwe. As always, it's a delight to have you join us here on the program. Tonight is a bit of an expanded conversation we're having on the program because the star discussion on the program has to do with the minimum wage of 70,000 naira, which many people say has brought closure to the controversies and the back and forth around this conversation. However, they say that's just in the interim. In any case, that again has been the clamor by Nigerians, particularly workers in this country, to say, look, we can't continue to earn an amount that can't take us home, even though it's referred to as take-home pay. So today is 70,000. However, the government now says that private employers, regardless of the category of employees or what the sector is, who refuse to or who for whatever reason would not pay 70,000 naira risk jail time. That sounds like a very serious matter because in the end, we've spoken as a media house, I mean Global Television, to private employers who say that the hardship of the economy, in other words, the economic realities we're dealing with at this time, will evidently make it very, very difficult, nearly impossible for them to pay 70,000 naira. So the question is it realistic to pay 70,000 naira across all of these, this private sector as we know it today? Because when you look at it, the private sector operates the desk on Global Television. So our conversation tonight, the big story, focuses on the issue of the minimum wage and how this impacts the private sector in this country. Manufacturing for a couple of decades has not been optimal in terms of performance and outputs, and currently it is the private sector that drives manufacturing, even though government would have to, as a matter of sheer necessity, put in place all of the crucial framework to ensure that the sector continues to drive. So if the manufacturing sector, for example, how possible then will it be to pay 70,000 naira as minimum wage. Some people have argued, they say, look, in places like the United States, Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom, it's common for you to find that minimum wage is universal, and then there are policy frameworks around these elements, which is very important because it also impacts one way or another livelihoods and, of course, families. In the US, for instance, minimum wage is determined by states. So you can have, for instance, just for the purpose of this conversation tonight, a state like, say, Texas paying $12.50 as minimum wage, which is per hour, by the way. And then you go to a place like California, you're doing $14, $15, maybe even $16 per hour minimum wage. So in Nigeria, can we have the same conversation? The answer is capital no. The way we operate in this country. That again perhaps has led to the debate about people saying that state governments should be allowed to determine what they can pay. But Labour has vehemently, over time and very consistently, resisted that position because they believe that it will be counterproductive for them. It will not be in their overall interest. So what exactly should it be? Should we allow a situation where in terms of determining what is paid? Because as it stands right now, as far as many states are concerned, whether they've spoken up about it or not, the federal government has just said what it can pay. They can't pay that, and as such, it's going to be a protracted discussion to have, whether now or in future. And that's easy to understand for perspectives. As it stands today, there are states that still currently pay 30,000, and the irony of it all is, you go to such states, they have a backlog of salaries, arrears they've not paid in months. There are states that started paying 40,000 naira not very long ago, even though we know that states like Edo and a few others have now moved to 70,000. In the case of Edo, there's still the debate about how that the state government is borrowing left, right, and center, yet is not able to put substantial, visible infrastructure on the ground for the people. So it's as complex a conversation as you can only imagine tonight. But there's also the issue of ASU now saying that, look, we are likely going to embark on an industrial action, which is, of course, a strike, if the federal government does not do X, Y, Z. What does all of this mean? Of course, that's the reason we'll spend of our time with you on the tonight and provide you insights here. another instance of industrial action within the university education space in this country. We've seen several of all of these actions over time, but ASU would always cycle back to the 2009 agreement, because they say there are very salient clauses in the agreements that the federal government has not met. What the reasons are, of course, will be another conversation altogether. But it goes to show that the impact that strike actions have on our education can only be imagined than even experienced in the first instance. It's the reason apparently hear people say things like, I signed up for, or I was admitted into a 4-year course, but I spent 6 years ultimately finishing my study and things like that. It turns out our guest tonight is an academic himself who understands most of the fundamental dynamics in this regard and will shed light on all of those for us tonight. So let's take a break, and when we return, it will be me and our guest having this back and forth about all of these issues already highlighted. Hope you stay with us, everyone. I'm joined by Dr. Babaya Sule. He's a senior lecturer, International Relations Department, Federal University, Keshere in Gombe State. He joined us on the program tonight live via Zoom. Dr. Sule, I'd like to say, first of all, thank you. It's been a while, and it's good to see you. All right. Let's begin with our first discussion tonight, which focuses on the issue of the 70,000 naira minimum wage. Incidentally, you are a worker in this country. The federal government is now saying that those private sector entities who cannot, for whatever reason, pay 70,000 naira as minimum wage to their employees risk being sent to jail. How much of socio-economic sense does that make, considering where we are as a country today?
From just a year
I'm not so sure if Dr. Sule can hear us. Can you hear us, Dr. Sule?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. I don't know if you can hear me also.
I can hear you all right, very well, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. What I was saying is, I don't think we have what we can call a minimum wage, because minimum wage should be something that at least will be able to cater for a worker. An assumption that being alone, at least he should be able to cater for his transportation, feeding, accommodation, and other logistics for 1 month. But what is being offered, 70,000 naira, to be just a collective insult to the psychology of the workers in Nigeria, because I don't think it's something that if you look at it just from last year to date, almost everything skyrocketed. It is priced at least not less than between 4 to 5 times, which means if there should be justice, the minimum wage should also be raised at least between 4 to 5 times, which means it should be somewhere around 120, 150,000. But then let's assume it is a collective bargaining agreed by NLC with the government, so we call it a minimum wage. Now the question is, even the government itself is not willing to implement, talk less of other private sectors. The reason why I say so is because I could remember very well the first governor to come out and declare that he will not be able to pay is the governor of Gombe State. And not only him alone, he also hinted that there are also other governors that may not be able to pay, although he made a reverse and then later I disclosed that he set up a committee and that he will pay. Now, what is astonishing here is that anything that has to do with benefit for Nigerians will have to go to undergo a committee. But anything that is wicked, that is torturing and suffering, does not wait for any committee. Announcing that subsidy is gone does not wait for even inaugural swearing in talkless of a committee. Announcing electricity tariff hike does not wait for any committee. Naira floating or rather Naira devaluation does not wait for any committee. Acquiring jet for the president does not wait for any committee. And so many, in fact, the recent electricity, the recent petroleum increase also does not wait for any committee. But for a paltry sum of 70,000 naira to be arrived at, we have to wait for committees, open committees for many months, agreement, disagreement, re-agreement, and disagreement and agreement. Now, after signing into a law since July, we are now almost toward the end of September, which means around 2 months. The government could not deem it fit to set up a committee for consequential adjustment until just last week. All of them are delay tactics. So now what I'm trying to say is, if the government itself is unwilling, either directly or indirectly, to implement the minimum wage that would not amount to anything, now, how do you expect the private sectors to implement? So I don't believe that the government itself will willingly implement, and therefore the government will lack the zeal and the will to impose compliance by the private sectors. And I think there is also another factor that we need to consider. Yes, 70,000 naira as a minimum wage to me should be paid to all. But there are some private sectors that if they are to pay 70,000 naira minimum wage, the cost implication is that it will still go back to the ordinary man. For example, take private schools, where maybe you pay 30,000 naira per term as a school fees for your ward. And now, if they are to meet up the requirement for 70,000 naira, maybe you need to pay 50 or 60,000 naira. Now you see, it's as good as you are being paid a minimum wage, and you are taking back this minimum wage that you are paid, then back again to where you are being paid. So there are some organizations that will not be able to pay. Actually, we have to be realistic. The issue is the government is not willing to pay what it is supposed to pay, while the private sectors are being forced to pay what they cannot afford to pay. So we should find a middle way in between. The government should raise and pay more, 100,000 and above, while private sectors should sincerely and honestly disclose what they should be able to pay. Some can afford to pay more than that, while some cannot pay. And I think by compelling them to pay, you will ground their business. And the purpose for economic stimulation is to ensure that others are motivated to come into the small scale businesses, not to discourage them to shut down the businesses just because they must meet up the minimum wage payment. So we should be cautious. The government should also look into itself and see what it is doing right and what it is doing wrong. We are not trying to impose what is impracticable. What I'm saying is, it's impracticable to say that all private sectors must pay if we are to be practical. But if we want to be theoretical, then we can go ahead. But I think we should be honest with ourselves and look at all the environment, look at the peculiarities and other things that I think can make a private sector establishment to pay or not to pay. I think this is important.
All right, Dr. Sule, excuse me. I remember when we started this conversation earlier in this country about the need to do an upward review of minimum wage, which culminated in this 70,000 naira conversation we're having tonight. We had a tripartite committee, which means there was federal government, states were represented. Of course, I'm sure that was done using the vehicle of the Nigeria Governors Forum. And then the private sector too had representation. Now, question is, from what we are seeing today, these debates about whether or not private sector employees should be paid 70,000 naira, is this not indicative of the possibility that this issue had not even been resolved at that point before we started escalating to the committee and then discussing the elements of implementation?
Well, I think before I respond to this critical question, I think it is pertinent to reflect our mind to the fact that the private sector is categorized into subcategories depending on their mightiness. For example, even Dangote business establishment or BUA or the Adenugas are also private sector. Commercial banks, pension administrators, and others are also private sectors. So there are private sectors that have already been paying more than 10 times or more of the current minimum wage. Then there are private sectors that are in between, middle one. These ones also, I think, will be able to pay. And there are private sectors that I think are within the lower category, which I believe they are not adequately represented. Because if you look at the tripartite committee, it is just to me like a cosmetic committee involving the part of the labor which is accused of corruption and compromise, allegedly, and then the part of the government, both federal government and state governors, and then the organized private sector. But the question that we should pose or ask ourselves is this organized private sector adequately and roundly represented from all perspectives? That is the representation considering all other private sectors, whether, for example, I have just 2 workers, 5 workers, 3 employees, 10 employees, 20 employees, and depending on my own average daily or monthly income, what I am charging for my services and the profit that I am making, I don't think they have all looked into all these issues. So you are right. We can say that the negotiation for the new minimum wage maybe failed to reach a harmonious conclusion and agreement that all will take. So in this regard, it is good that the government is trying to warn and to ensure compliance and enforcement. But the government should not be rigid. It should be flexible. If there are those that will not be able to afford, but the workers under that private sector decided to pledge their loyalty and continue to work under the condition, then they should do so. But not what I'm saying is, for those private sectors that will be able to afford without any iota of doubt, the government should ensure compliance. This one there is a good move. But for those that cannot, if you insist they may close down the business, and then it means loss of job. And government could not provide replacement for those who lost their job because of the closure of such minor or miniature private sectors. I think I gave an example with schools. That's where I have experience. I know today many private schools, for example, in Gombe, where I reside. It's not only in Gombe. I believe it cut across many states in Nigeria, especially the less cosmopolitan states, where they charge school fees of between 10,000, 15,000, 20 or 30,000 naira per term for the pupils or the wards. Now, in this case, mostly it is out of the school fees that they charge, that they used to pay salaries for their staff. And right now, some of them are only paying 20,000, some 25, some 30,000 naira for graduate. Now, if you insist that they must comply by paying 70,000 naira, it means a school that is now charging 15,000 naira as school fees must charge around 30 to 40,000 naira as a school fee in order to be able to raise up the necessary needed income to settle the payment of 70,000 naira minimum wage for the employees. And the repercussion is that it will still go back to what? To the common man or the ordinary man, because he will be the one who will bear the brunt of the increase. So yeah, you see, in this regard, maybe it is better if such kind of organizations are just allowed to have a discretionary approach, whereby what they feel they can pay, since there is a competition, thank God. If you cannot afford, you are a worker, and you are enslaving me. I'm working like a slave in a private school, and I'm opportune to now secure an employment with a state or local government where they will pay me 70,000 naira. There is no doubt I will dump you and go there for that. So if they want to retain good brains, they will find a way of surviving. So I think the private sectors are not adequately represented from all strata of their operations. And based on that, I think we need to consider this before jumping into such a draconian approach, where it may lead to closure of some businesses, and at the end of the day, it may affect jobs for some Nigerians, because the government is not already providing jobs. The private sectors that are providing jobs should not be forced into closing, which will further escalate the nemesis of unemployment and underemployment.
There are two very core elements I'd like you to react to quickly, Dr. Sule, before we take a break and switch to our next discussion. As it stands today, you and I know that by the time this new minimum wage becomes law, it's going to be an issue of you against the law. I mean, for those in the private sector, which means if they do not pay, they are liable in the eye of the law. That's the number one issue. The second is, would you say, given your narrative tonight and what you know, being, of course, somebody who works for government, would you advise that we allow states to determine what they can pay, so that if I'm in Benue State, for example, and as a professional or a career person, I'm not comfortable with the minimum wage in that state, I can go to Enugu, I can move up north to Sokoto, I can decide to go to Cross River or or your state, for example. Would that be your recommendation going forward?
Well, thank you very much. I think on the first issue, yes, you are right. Once a law is passed, it's a national law. Any attempt to violate that law is against the policy makers, and is against the extant law of the land, which is subject to punishment based on the necessary provisions of that section of the law. But I always like being practical, because practicality is what matters most when we are dealing with honest issues. How many times have we been having minimum wage as a law, but the private sectors are not complying, and no law instrument is being activated against them? I know that Obasanjo initiated a minimum wage of 5,000 naira. Most private sectors failed to comply. Nothing happened to them. I know President Adwa paid a minimum wage of 11,000 naira. The private sectors failed to comply. No instrument of law is activated against them. I know the same thing with President Jonathan of 18,000 naira. The same thing with President Buhari of 30,000 naira. So in this regard, if we are to be honest with ourselves, definitely some private sectors will violate, and no sanction will be meted upon them, at least not all of them. Because the government sometimes, as I said, need to be flexible, and sometimes need to be critical, and sometimes the government does not even give the necessary or required supervision that will impose compliance, so they operate the way they wish. For example, let me just give you, anyway, I don't want to utter it publicly, but as a matter of discussion also, I must say it. One of the ways that private sectors used to abet such compliance is they disengage all their workers from being permanent workers, and then employ all of them as contract workers. By employing someone as a contract worker, the minimum wage law is not applicable to him, because a contract worker has a different terms. You may pay him higher, you may pay him lower, you may give him some entitlement like housing, like whatever. In fact, in a contract, it only depends on the terms offered by the employer and the terms agreed by the employee. So this is now the logic that some of the private sectors are using. So you see, in this regard, they can escape the hands of the law, except if the government will decide maybe to make another law that will say, okay, whether it is contract or not, no formal private or public establishment will pay less than a minimum wage for any type of appointment, for any type of engagement. I think that will resolve the issue. Otherwise, they have a loophole to escape constitutionally. Now, on the issue of relocation to other states, I think going by the law of Nigeria, it is already obtainable. Now, as an indigenous of Gombe State, I think by law of Nigeria, I have the right and I'm entitled to go to Lagos or Edo State, or to go to Enugu State or Abia or Kogi or Kano or anywhere and seek for an employment. And I'm entitled to be employed if I am qualified. And this, I think, is being done in Nigeria for many years. And even today, it is still obtainable. But the problem is, as a result of the further increasing division among the Nigerians by our elite, in terms of ethnic division, regional sentiment, religious division, today it is becoming more and more difficult. I may go to Enugu or Lagos, for example, apply. I will be the most qualified candidate, but I may be denied. I have seen a situation whereby a citizen from Borno State is denied a directorship of a ministry because he is not from Kanuri ethnic group. He is from that state, but because he is not from Kanuri major group, he is denied. I have seen a situation whereby in Bauchi Federal Teaching Hospital under the ATBU, someone attended an interview for the director of admin. He passed the interview, but they find a way of frustrating not to take up the seat by denying him accommodation an official vehicle, and also instructing him that he will continue to receive his salaries from the place he is living before his appointment is now regularized here. This person is from Yobe State. Imagine the distance between Bauchi and you, and it's a federal establishment. So this is now the problem, but still it is being obtained. You can find some coppers who are from the north. In Lagos, for example, if they became outstanding in terms of their sterling performance and qualities, they are returned by Lagos state government. It occurs in all states within the federation. But for you just to move from Gombe to other state and seek an employment today, I think it is much. In fact, even the federal institutions within this state are domesticated. For example, now, you can take a federal university or a federal teaching hospital or any other federal institution, whatever. To your surprise, you can see that if it is in Gombe State, for example, you will find that majority, at least more than 50% of the staff are from Gombe, and maybe neighboring Bauchi, Maiduguri, Yola, Taraba, and Yobe. And if you go to Enugu, the same thing. If you go to Lagos, the same thing. So, and I think this is one of the fundamental lapses of a national question that we fail to address and overcome, which I think are what we need to do, because the services is the most important. Whether you are a Yoruba or an Igbo or a Niger Delta, if you will come to Gombe and give my state the services that an indigenous of the state cannot give, you are welcome. That's what I want. That's what I like. It's better than to employ somebody from the home who will not work but frustrate you, and he is in your payroll. But honestly, in responding to your question, finally, it is much difficult now for such movement when you are not satisfied, except perhaps for a situation where you have an extraordinary skill, like a software developer, graphic designer, or a professor, or a consultant medical doctor, or just some people with some exceptional, extraordinary qualities that are needed anywhere. That's where you can relocate or move easily. But just an ordinary worker, administrator, clerk, whatever, I don't think it is feasible nowadays to relocate from one state to another because you are not satisfied with the service. It is much difficult,
I think
honestly.
that much makes a lot of sense, Dr. Sole. But we are hitting the quick break right now. When we return, there's a big one here because with regards to withheld salaries, we're told that again, the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, that is SSANU, joining the Nigerian Association of NASU, threatening indefinite strike. Again, this is not the first time. We talked about that a while ago. But the challenge will be that whatever action is taken in this regard will have one form of impact, which is adverse or the other, on university education in this country. We will engage Dr. Babayo Sule once again on these fronts when we return after this break. Do stay with us.
Is the desk on global television?
Nigeria, come join Anthony Mamadou on television's most compelling and facts-finding talk live show.
We are the Palestinians. We are the Canaan because
that this country gets it right.
Who are these bandits? It's the Desk on Global Television, where we analyze and dissect storming issues and commentaries in the world's biggest black nation, Nigeria.
Who is being held accountable for this money?
The eyes have it.
We stay and decide policies and reforms on the Desk. Tune in Mondays to Fridays, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Global Television. Let's stay on the Desk.
The Joint Action Committee of the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities and the Non-Academic Staff Union of Educational and Other Allied Institutions has issued a fresh 3-week ultimatum, threatening to commence an indefinite strike should the government fail to pay members withheld salaries. This would be the third time in a year the two unions would threaten to embark on indefinite strike over the unresolved salaries of their members withheld by the Nigerian government in 2022 during a prolonged strike. Now, in a statement dated 30 September, the unions expressed frustration at the government's failure to pay for months' withheld salaries and alleged refusal to implement key agreements from the 2022 Memorandum of Understanding. Dr. Sule, again, we're back here. Well, we don't have a choice now, do we? But would you quickly react to these threats by these very important unions within the university system in this country? What do you think is different in this instance?
Well, thank you very much. I think the Nigerian situation is unfortunate. I am not aware of any country on earth that is joking and playing with education the way we are doing in Nigeria. I don't know actually what our policy makers are off to. I don't know where they want to push us to. Because this is something that one need not to make any threat or any attempt at boycotting service before he is being paid his entitlement. I'm not aware of any politician that has his own entitlement withheld for whatever reason. I don't know why they are just joking and playing with the workers in the education sector. To start with, I think the crisis has to do with it's a prolonged one. There is a mistake from both the side of the government and the unions. From the side of the government, you entered into an agreement freely and willingly without anyone forcing you to do so at the barrel of the gun or at any point in time. When you make this agreement as a government, as a custodian of the society, as a supervisor of the education sector, as somebody who is the employer of these employees, as someone who is responsible for their welfare and well-being, as someone who has the trust and the mandate of the public to deliver in discharging quality educational delivery for the citizenry, my expectation is you are to willingly fulfill the part of your own bargain without necessarily even being reminded. And even if you didn't do so and you are reminded, you should go ahead and do it. Unfortunately, the policy makers have been defaulting and redefaulting since 2009 to date. And the mistake of the unions is sometimes they wanted to look honest. They want to be sincere. They are saying that if all Nigerians are not trustworthy, at least they should try to be trustworthy by ensuring that only what they are entitled to is being paid. There are some organizations that I know Whether you are entitled to an allowance or you are not, they just pay you. It's just a flat rate. But in the case of the university unions, they said that this their an academic allowance should only be paid to the members when they are entitled to. If you are not entitled, you should not be paid. That is why, based on this, they agreed often that it should not be paid immediately. Rather, they should wait until the end of an academic calendar year. Then they can compute for those that are entitled and what they are entitled to, and the government will pay. And you know the attitude of our policy makers. Whenever you promise them that they are going to pay in a standard of deferred payment to be paid later, they will quickly rush and agree, but their intention is they will not pay. That is one aspect that is lingering for the unions and even the ASU. The second one is withholding salaries during strike. This wickedness and this insensitivity, inhumanity, I don't know where our leaders are borrowing or adopting this issue from. Because one, no worker is happy to embark on strike without his entitlement being denied. You deny someone his entitlement after several promises and promises and promises, yet you fail to fulfill. He felt that the only way to speak to you in a language that you will understand is to go on strike. Immediately he embarked on strike, you stop his salaries because you want to kill him. I don't know of any government that can stop the salaries of its employees, citizens, to kill them with hunger, except in the Nigerian context. Of course, people can argue that there is an industrial law of no work, no pay, obtainable even in America, in UK, whatever. But are these policy makers, the leaders in America and the UK, denying the citizens or the employees their entitlement to the extent that they must embark on strike? The answer is no. If you see workers in UK or US or other part of the world embarking on strike, pay. So in this regard, you will say that what they are asking is a privilege and a luxury. So therefore, no work, no pay until they come back. This one is a good policy. But for someone that is expressing his grievance, is aggrieved because you failed to pay his entitlement to honor the agreement, and you are withholding his salaries, not only withholding, you promising in written with a signature that you will pay him the withheld salaries within a so time frame. You are still reneging from the payment. What can they do? What can we do? I think the only thing is just to embark on an action that, of course, will make the government, will compel the government to pay. But don't forget that President Tinubu during his campaign promised that there will be no strike in Nigerian universities. Just the way he promised that subsidy will go. Our prayers is let us see both sides of the promises fulfilled, not only the negative one and then ignoring the positive. He already defaulted in one, the living wage. He promised that what he's going to give is a living wage, not just a minimum wage. He has defaulted and failed to fulfill this promise. But the petroleum subsidy removal is fully fulfilled. He promised that there will be no strike in the Nigerian universities. So let us pray and let us please urge and remind him and his people that this is what you promised. Let us see how you will fulfill this promise, because there will be another election. There will be campaign. We are going to gauge. We are going to wait. We are going to measure your promises, the positive ones that are relevant and important to the Nigerians, and the negative ones that do not benefit the Nigerians, and see which one you fulfilled and which one you failed to fulfill. And even if it is going to be at the behest of our lives, we are going to inform the Nigerian citizenry that this is what is fulfilled, this is the unfulfilled, is now left for the Nigerians to choose. So because of that, I am urging the government to please kindly settle with these unions by paying them. Although we are talking of the JAC, that is SSANU, NASU, and NAT. We are not talking of us, because us already gave their ultimatum. I think the ultimatum is lapsing any moment from now. Yet we are yet to see anything on ground. So sometimes it is even the government that is pushing the unions to go on strike by frustrating them beyond resistance. And the same government will now go immediately, you embark on strike to stop your salary so that you will die. Unfortunately for them, what they forget is that no living being will die because you hold his salaries. If God decided that he will spend so lives, years, days on earth, with your salaries, you will survive. For example, they would held our salaries for 8 months. During this withholding of salaries, we got many opportunities where we got income that is triple of the salaries withheld, which means they did it without any repercussion. So in essence, it is better to understand that withholding worker salaries because they are aggrieved and they embark on an industrial action is not a solution. The solution is a honest approach to the matters. What you promise, fulfilled. What you cannot fulfill, don't promise. Simply tell them the reality that this is what I can do, this I can't do. So let's move by that. I think this should be better. As for the unions, I think the best thing to do is, of course, to relinquish some part of their struggles because the society is not ready to adopt or to welcome the struggles. Take us, for example. You said that the government must fund education. The government is saying, I cannot fund. Why not now meet at the middle level? Since it is the government that is the provider, is saying I can't provide, I also should accept that the government cannot provide. If now the government decide that students should now pay a tuition of 1 million naira per session, if the Nigerian citizens that use their thumb to vote for these politicians are not satisfied with the policies, let them go and meet the politician and express their disagreement. You cannot continue to shoulder the responsibility of all because you are a philanthropist, you are a Samaritan. It will not work this way. So these are some of the mistakes that the unions are making, and this is the mistake that the government is making. The government should pay without any iota of doubt. For example, I, as an academic staff, is being paid my salaries for doing 3 major works: for teaching, for research, for community development. The interview I'm conducting with you now is part of the community development. And I believe you can testify, and the audience can also testify, that during a strike, there is no single day when you approach me for an interview that I declare and say, I am not being paid, I cannot do it. I have been researching, I have been conducting community services. It's only teaching in the classroom that I am not doing. If the government is human enough, the government should say, okay, fine, I will not pay you the component of the teaching that you are not doing, but for the community service and for the research, I will pay you. But the government decided to withhold the salaries of even the management of the universities that had been there without going on strike. Even those staff that the Nigerian government give them sponsorship with the Nigerian money to go and study abroad, who are not aware that strike is ongoing, they are abroad studying, government stop their salaries and all these things. It sounds crazy, you know. So I think the unions are right. The government should pay them their entitlement without any delay. And I don't think the government should allow a strike to occur in the university because of withheld salaries, because it will compound the crisis. Because once they embark on another strike, the government would withhold salaries again. You are not through with the previous withheld salaries, you are withholding another, which means crisis upon crisis. So what does government mean with the university system? So please pay them and avoid all these issues, contentious issues that will lead to strike in future.
That's a fine narrative you just presented, Dr. Babayo Sule. Would like to say a big thank you to you for taking our time to share your thoughts on these very germane issues on the desk tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm also grateful for giving me the opportunity of the platform to express my sincere views toward my country's development.
All right, so you have a great evening ahead of you. We'll be talking to Dr. Babayo Sule, Senior Lecturer, International Relations Department, Federal University, Kashere, Gombe State, sharing his thoughts on this very timely issue. But we do hope that even though today it is SSANU and NASU talking about issues arising from the 2022 Memorandum of Understanding signed with the federal government, it doesn't become ASU, the Academic Staff Union of Universities, coming up tomorrow to also take us back to clauses from the 2009 agreements, which came up as a result of some 8-month strike 15 years ago. I'm Uyag Mofwebe, thanking you so very much for watching The Desk tonight. We'll see you again.